The great hall of Varnhold had never carried so many scents at once, and Myelis, who carried none at all, moved along its edges, the way a shadow moves along a wall. There and not there, 100 women stood in the light. They had come from every high house in the High Reach, and each of them had been washed and oiled and dressed so that her scent would be the one the Alpha King remembered. The air was thick with it, myrrh and crushed pine, river iris the warm animal, musk a she-wolf gives off when she wants to be wanted. To the wolves in that hall it was a language, loud as shouting. To Melis it was nothing. She had had no scent since she was a small child, and so she had learned young that the safest place in any room was the part of it no one looked at. She looked at that part now, the long bright line of them, and she counted. She was not counting the women. She was counting the pieces of the ceremony that stood between this moment and the door. First the horns, then the king, upon the high step. Then, the calling of the houses, one by one, which would take the better part of an hour. And then, last of all, the walk, when the Alpha King came down among them and offered his hand for the opening dance. By the oldest law of the High Reach, the woman he danced first was the woman he had chosen, and after that, there would be no leaving. The doors would be shut and the feasting would run until dawn, and a serving woman with no scent would be trapped in a sea of noses, with a secret bound tight against her skin. She meant to be gone by the walk. 4 things stood between her and the cold night air, and she had counted 3 of them away already. The horns had sounded, 3 long notes that she felt in her teeth. That was the first thing gone. Then the king had come to the high step, and the whole hall had turned toward him the way iron turns toward a lodestone, and that was the second. Now the herald was working down the line with his staff and his long roll of names, and each house was being called in its turn, and each daughter was stepping forward to be seen. That was the third thing, and it was happening now, and it would run long enough for one careful servant to set down her tray and slip out the small door behind the tapestries, and be no one in the dark, where no one could learn that she was nothing. Melis set down her tray. She did not look at the king. She had made a practice, across 4 years in this house, of never once looking at him, because he was the single creature in all of Varnhold whose attention she could not afford. He read a room better than any wolf alive. It was said he had named a traitor in his own guard, from the change in the man's sweat across one quiet supper. A woman with no scent was a hole in the world to a nose like that, and holes draw the eye. So she kept her eyes on the floor, and she moved. Behind her the herald called another house. Ahead of her the tapestry door waited, a thin seam of dark between 2 hangings, and she counted her own steps now in place of the ceremony, 10 paces to the wall, then 8, then 6, the roar of the hall thinning at her back as she passed out of the light. She had her hand on the cold iron edge of the door when the herald's voice stopped. It should not have stopped. There were 40 houses left to call. It stopped in the middle of a name, and into the sudden hush came the one sound a servant never wishes to hear at her back, the sound of a great hall full of people falling silent all at once, and turning, all at once, to look at the same thing. Melis turned as well, because not turning would have been stranger. The Alpha King had come down off the high step. He had not walked the line. He stood alone in the center of the wide floor with 100 perfumed women arrayed before him like a garden in bloom, and he was not looking at a single one of them. His head was up, his nostrils moved. He was searching the room the way a man searches a dark house for the thing in it that is wrong, and as Melis watched, frozen, her cold hands still on the colder door, his search came to an end. He was looking at her. For the length of one held breath, Melis told herself he was looking past her at some latecomer, in the passage, at a guard, at anything at all. Then the Alpha King began to walk, and he walked toward the door, toward her, and the garden of women turned their lovely heads to follow him, and she understood that there was nothing behind her but the wall. She should have curtsied. She should have dropped her gaze and made herself small, and let him pass on to whatever had truly caught him. But she had spent the whole of her life being unseen, and being seen was so strange, so complete, that it held her where she stood. He crossed the floor without hurry. He was younger up close than the throne had made him seem, though there was gray coming in early at his temples and an old white line of scar along the back of one hand. He stopped an arm's length from her. This near, the whole hall could see plainly that the king of the High Reach had walked away from 100 daughters of 100 houses to stand before a serving woman in a plain gray dress. "You are leaving," he said. It was not an accusation. He said it the way a man says a thing that puzzles him. "Your Majesty will not miss one pair of hands," Malus said. And then, because that had come out far too plain, she bent her knee at last. "Forgive me. I am only clearing the cups." "No." He tilted his head. She watched him breathe her in and find, where every other soul in the room gave him something, only silence. Something moved behind his eyes that she could not put a name to, and it frightened her more than anger would have, because anger she understood. "No, you are not only anything," he said, half to himself. "Every person in this hall is shouting at me without opening their mouths. You are the one quiet thing in it." She had no answer for that. No one had ever called the empty place inside her quiet. They had called it wrong, when they marked it at all, and mostly they did not mark it, and that had always been the whole point of her life. Then the Alpha King did the thing that broke the evening in half. He turned so that the entire hall could see, and he held out his hand to her, palm upward, in the old way, the way that means the opening dance. The hush cracked. She heard it travel through the 100, like wind through standing wheat, and then a single voice cut clean across it, high and bright and furious. "Your Majesty cannot be serious." Sethra of House Aldenmar came forward, out of the front of the line, and the crowd parted to let her, because she was the one every soul there had expected to see, standing where Malus now stood. She was everything the hall had been built to reward. Gold hair coiled through with river pearls, a scent about her like warm honey and cold iron that made the men near her stand a little straighter without knowing why they did. She looked at the king's outstretched hand, and then she looked at Malus, and her lovely face did something ugly. "That is a servant," Sethra said. "That is worse than a servant. Has no one told you what she is, my lord?" "None. A wolf with no scent is a wolf with no soul. My grandmother would have had her drowned at birth for an ill omen, and here she is, pouring your wine at your own choosing." She turned to the hall, then playing it, and it was an easy thing to play. "Shall the whole of the High Reach be ruled, beside a creature that even the dead could not smell?" The murmur that answered her was low, and it was cruel, and it agreed with her. Malus felt each word land where it was aimed. She had heard most of them before, in kitchens, in cold corridors, out of other mouths, but never in front of 600 people with the king's open hand held out between herself and the woman speaking them. The old habit rose in her to shrink, to beg pardon, to fold herself down into nothing so quickly that there would be nothing left for anyone to strike. She did not do it. She lifted her chin instead, and she looked, not at Sethra, but at the king, and she kept her voice level. "The lady is right, that I have no scent, your Majesty. She is wrong, that it means I have no soul. It means only that I have never once in my life been able to lie about what I feel, the way the rest of you do every hour of the day, with a little oil and a held breath. I am the one honest person in this room." She let a beat fall, which is why I was leaving it. Somewhere back in the crowd, a man laughed, caught off guard. Sethra's face went white to the lips. And the Alpha King, his hand still held out, still open, still waiting, smiled at Malus as though she had just proven something he had staked the whole evening upon. He did not lower his hand. "Dance with me," he said. The floor cleared for them the way water draws back from a dropped stone. Malus put her hand into his, because she could see no way to refuse it, that did not end worse than obeying, and the moment their palms met, a sound went around the hall, part gasp and part groan, the sound of 100 hopes going out together like candles in a draught. The musicians, who did not know what else in the world to do, began to play. He danced well and he danced plainly, without a single flourish, and when she faltered on the first turn, he steadied her without appearing to. The way he had steadied the whole of the moment, and beneath the cover of the music, he spoke so that only she could hear him. "I have shamed you in front of your betters," he said. "I am sorry for it. I did not plan this when I came down the step." "Then why, Your Majesty," she managed, "are you doing it?" He was quiet through half a turn. "Because in a room where every other soul was straining to be chosen, you alone were trying to leave. A man in my place learns to distrust everything that is held out to him, and to trust the one thing that walks away." His hand shifted at her back, and it slid a little toward her wrist where the wide gray cuff of her sleeve was pinned close, and for one stopped heartbeat, she was certain he would feel through the cloth, the raised skin she kept bound beneath it, the thing that no living person was permitted to see. She turned her arm away, smooth, as though it were only a figure of the dance. He let her turn it. If he noticed, he said nothing at all, and she set that away carefully in her mind. A king who noticed everything and could choose, when he wished, to say none of it. The dance ended, and then the true trouble of the night began. An old man in the gray and iron of the king's household came forward before the last note had fully died. This was Grail, who carried the law of the High Reach in his head, the way other men carry their own names, and his long face was the face of a man swallowing something bitter and swallowing it whole. "It is done," Grail said, and though he spoke toward the king, he pitched it for the hall, because the hall was what needed to hear it. "By the law of the opening dance, which is older than this house, older than the High Reach itself, the woman who dances first with the Alpha King is his chosen, and that choosing cannot be unmade without unmaking the king's own given word. Whatever she may be," his pale eyes touched Malus and slid off her again, giving away nothing. "It is done!" Sethra Aldemar did not scream. Malus almost wished that she had. Instead, the beautiful woman gathered her skirts and her scent and her fury into something very still and very cold, and when she spoke it was almost gentle, which was worse. "My father gave 300 spears to the crown in the Winter War," she said. "My house has stood at the right hand of the High Reach for 4 generations of kings." She looked at Malus then, and she smiled. And the smile was the worst thing that had happened in the whole long night. "Enjoy the dance, little nothing. A crown a man gives you in one evening can be taken back from you in one evening as well. We shall all of us see how dearly the king loves a bride. The court has already buried." She swept out, and the whole of House Aldenmar went with her, a long, bright river of the most powerful people in the room, flowing toward the doors, and every last one of them looked at Malus as they passed, and not one of the looks was anything but a promise. When they had gone, the Alpha King turned to her. Up on the high step, his seneschal was already calling the hall to order, and servants were already pretending very hard to be busy, and into that noise the king said, low and only to her, "You did not choose this. I know that you did not. Tonight you are bound to me by a law that neither of us spoke aloud, and that is a poor way to hand any living person their whole life." He paused. "So hear me. I will not come to your door tonight, nor any night after it, until the day you tell me plainly that you wish me to. You have my word on it, for whatever a stranger's word is worth to you. Whatever else they have made of you this evening, you are not a prize that was won." It was the kindest thing that anyone had said to her in longer than she could rightly remember, and it frightened her more than all of Sethra's threats laid end to end. Because cruelty, she had spent her life learning to plan around, and kindness she had not. That night, when the great hall had emptied at last, and the last of the 100 perfumes had gone cold and stale in the rafters, Malus sat alone in the narrow servant's room that would not be hers for very much longer, and she unpinned the gray cuff from her left wrist, and she unwound the strip of cloth beneath it. The mark was still there as it had been every night of her life, 3 thin lines and a broken circle, silver pale against her skin. the birth brand of the Alpha's own line of the Ashfin. The pack that had burned to ash when she was a child of 6, the pack that the whole wide world believed had died down to its very last soul. She was that last soul. And by an old law and a single dance, she had just been chosen, and named, and lifted up in front of 600 watching eyes into the one thing that a hidden creature can never live through being seen. By the next morning, the whole of Varnhold knew, and the knowing of it changed the air of the place more than any perfume could have done. The servants who had looked straight through Malus for 4 years looked at her now. The scullery girls she had scrubbed pots beside went silent when she passed. She had been moved before dawn, without anyone asking whether she wished it, out of the narrow room under the eaves and into a set of chambers with a fire already lit and a window that gave onto the king's own gardens. And the strangeness of standing in the middle of so much warmth, meant for her alone, was almost worse than the cold had ever been. Only Hala treated her as she always had. Hala had run the household floors of Varnhold since before Malleus was born, a broad, plain, iron-haired woman who had taken a scentless girl in off the road 4 years ago without once asking the question that everyone else asked, and who now stood in the doorway of the fine new rooms with her arms folded and her mouth pulled sideways. "Well," Hala said, "you have made a fine mess of it, and no mistake." But her old eyes were wet, and when Malus came to her, she caught the girl up in an embrace that smelled, to anyone but Malus, of bread and lye and safety. "You keep that wrist bound," she whispered against her hair, so low that no passing wolf could have caught it. "Chosen or not chosen, bound and covered, waking and sleeping. Do you hear me?" For Hala was the one soul in all the world who knew what Malus truly was, and had kept it, and would keep it to her grave. That was the first mercy of the morning. The second was that she was not yet alone in the world. The third did not come until much later, and by then it had teeth. They came for her before noon. It was custom. Hala warned her. Barely in time to warn her at all. When an Alpha King took a chosen, the great houses came to greet her, and among wolves a greeting was not a thing made of words. Malus stood in the receiving room with her hands folded and her heart beating like a bird shut in a box, and one lord after another crossed to her, bent close and breathed her in, each of them expecting to read in her what a wolf reads in every other living creature, her rank, her mood, the truth beneath her face. And each of them finding instead the blank and silent place where all of that should have been, she watched their faces change. She watched the first unease pass from noble to noble, like a draught under a door. And then the king was there, though no one had seen him enter, and his hand was at the small of her back, light and certain, and he spoke over the unease, before it could harden into words. "You will forgive my chosen," he said, unhurried, pleasant. She was raised close, and raised quietly, and she does not hang herself on the air for any passing nose to paw through. "I find that I prefer it so." He let his gaze travel the room, mild as new milk, and under the mildness was cold iron. "I would take it very kindly if the rest of you learned to prefer it as well." The lords bowed and murmured and moved off, and the moment passed, and Malus breathed again. He had covered for her without knowing the half of what he covered. She filed that away with the other things she was learning about him, and the pile of them was growing dangerous. He sent her no summons that evening. He kept his word to the letter. But Hala carried up a folded note in the king's own plain hand, and it read only, "If you should wish for air, the low gate into the gardens stands unlocked tonight, and I will be at the far end of them, and I will come no nearer than you would have me." She should not have gone. She went. The king's garden had been planted, like nearly everything in a wolf's world. For the nose, by day, it was only green. By night it woke, and 100 pale flowers unfolded and poured their sweetness into the dark, until the air grew thick enough to lean upon, and every wolf who walked there walked half drunk and drowning happily. Malus walked into it and smelled nothing whatsoever. and for the first time since the night of the ball her head was wholly clear, and she understood, with a small cold jolt, that here, of all the places in Varnhold, her curse was the finer instrument. She could think, here. She would soon learn, could scarcely think here at all. He was at the far end, a darker shape against the dark, and true to his word he did not come nearer. I cannot read you, he said, when she had stopped a careful distance from him. He said it as though it were a wonder and not a fault. Do you know, I have never in my life stood beside a person I could not read. I have always known the fear on a man before he knew it himself. I have smelled the lie taking shape behind the teeth. And you, he shook his head slowly, you give me nothing. If I want to know what you are thinking, I find I have to do the strangest thing. I have to ask you, and then I have to believe your answer. And if I lie, Malus said, you will never know it. No, he agreed. I will have to trust you like a man with no nose at all. I have not had to trust anyone in a very long time. He was quiet a moment. I think that is why I walked the length of my own hall to reach you. Everyone in that room was something I could already smell. You were the one thing I would have to learn. They talked until the moon was high, the whole width of the path between them, two people who could be known to one another by words alone, or not at all. And it was only as she rose to go that he said, lightly, too lightly, the council will press soon for the knowing. He watched her go, still. The scent right before the whole of the pack, that seals a chosen as a mate in truth? It is only a formality. A pause. You have gone white. The crown did not frighten you like this. Why does that? She did not answer him that night. She said something about the cold, and she fled, and she lay awake until dawn with the word turning over and over in her. The knowing, the one right in all the wide world that she could not walk out of alive. For a wolf could hide nothing at the knowing. That was its whole purpose. Two mates stood before the gathered pack, and were scented by every nose in it, so that all might witness the truth of the bond, and no falsehood could stand in that place, and no secret. Malus would stand before 600 wolves, and give them the same silence she had given the lords, only there would be no king's hand at her back, quick enough to cover a silence that wide. They would know she was scentless before the pack of the whole realm. And if even one among them thought to wonder why, if even one looked closely at her wrist, she could not keep bound beneath a bridle sleeve, they would find 3 thin lines and a broken circle, and they would know the rest. So, the days that followed had a blade laid under them, and the days were not kind. Besides, the court had decided what she was. She was the scentless bride, the ill omen, the soulless thing the king had shamed 100 daughters to lift up out of the scullery. They did not say it to her face. They did not need to. It moved through the corridors ahead of her, and closed behind her like water, and she learned to walk through it, with her chin level and her eyes forward, answering every courtesy fully, and giving no one the satisfaction of seeing it reach her. She could not afford to be seen to bleed. A scentless woman, who could not even weep on the air, had only her face to betray her, and she had spent her whole life, making her face give away nothing at all. She learned quickly, too, that the king's throne was not the settled thing it looked from below. He had come to it young, and come to it hard, in a bad season, and the great houses had never quite forgiven him for surviving it. House Aldenmar, most of all. Sethra's people had grown vastly rich on the spoils of the old border wars, and they had spent that wealth buying up the court by inches, and a king whose chosen was a nobody with no scent and no house behind her looked, to men who counted such things. An unbonded choosing was a door left ajar. The council began to speak of the knowing, not as a formality, but as a necessity, a thing the pack required to feel its king was truly wed, and every voice that pressed for it was a voice House Aldenmar had already paid for. Keston did not force it. He had given her his word that he would not come to her door until she wished it, and he kept that word into this too, and each day that he kept at the court, read the keeping as weakness. Malus saw what his patience was costing him, and could not tell him why it must go on costing. And there was another thing, small and cold and growing. His wolf could not settle around her. She caught it in him more than once. He would be easy with her, warm even, the width of the garden path between them, and then some deep animal part of him would strain toward her out of habit, trying to catch the scent of the woman he was coming to want, and it would find nothing, and a shadow of unease would cross him that he could not master and did not understand. Once he said, half laughing, half not, "What are you?" And she felt the ground open under the question, and he caught himself and looked away, ashamed to have asked it. But the wolf in him went on asking. She could see that it did. A wolf is made to know its own, and everything in him knew that the woman he was falling toward was a locked room he could not enter, and no creature born to the nose can rest easy beside a thing it cannot smell. Still there were the nights in the garden, and those she came to live for against all her better sense. There, and only there, they were equal, both of them robbed of the sense the whole world ran on, and forced back onto plain words. She told him small, true things, and kept the great one back. He told her about the brother he had lost, and the crown he had never wanted. And one night, when she shivered, he took off his own heavy cloak and did not bring it to her, but laid it across the low wall exactly halfway between them, and stepped back, so that she might take it or not as she chose, and never feel a hand near her, and that clumsy, careful kindness undid her more than any embrace could have. Then the council set the date. They did it without warning, and they did it in open court, so that the king could not easily refuse, rising one after another, to name the good of the pack and the need for a sealed and certain bond, until Keston had no ground left to stand on that did not look like fear. The knowing would be held at the turning of the next moon. Malus stood at his side and kept her face a locked door, while the whole of the court watched to see it open, and inside her, a voice was counting again, the way it had counted at the ball, the days now instead of the steps, and every count brought the whole pack's 600 noses one day nearer to her bared and silent wrist. After that, she began to look for a way out, and because she could not ask a single soul, she did the only thing left to a woman with no one to ask. She listened. It was easier than it should have been, and the ease of it was the one gift her curse had ever given her. Wolves speak freely when they believe themselves alone, and a wolf believes himself alone when he cannot smell another near. But Malus threw nothing on the air. She could stand in the shadow of a doorway 3 paces from 2 talking lords, and be as good as invisible, no warm animal warning, drifting ahead of her to give her away, and they would never once think to look, because in all their lives no one had ever been able to stand that near unsmelled. Her whole life had been made of being unseen. Now, for the first time, she meant to use it. She found them on the 3rd night, in the cold gallery above the council room, where House Aldenmar kept its own council after the court had gone to bed. She heard Sethra's voice first, and then a man's, deeper, older, that she came to understand was Sethra's father, the lord of the house himself. "Let him keep his little nothing until the moon turns," the old lord was saying. "The knowing will do our work for us, and cleaner than any knife. He has bound himself to a bride he cannot seal. When she stands before the pack and gives them empty air, they will smell the wrongness on her. Or rather they will smell nothing on her, which is worse, and the pack will turn from the both of them in a single night. A king, the pack turns from, is not a king for long, a low sound, like a man well pleased. We need only wait, and be seen to have counseled patience, and let him ruin himself on the girl he would not give up." That was Sethra, sharper. He has a way of making them love what they should not. He made half that hall admire her, and she had just insulted me to my face. Then we helped them see her clearly. A pause, and when the old lord spoke again, his voice had dropped, and Malus had to hold her breath to catch it, and catching it, she wished she had not. "There's more to that scullery girl than a missing scent. No creature is born blank. A scent can be stripped from a wolf, but only by old and ugly means. The kind of means a pack uses, on its own, when it wishes to unmake someone entirely, to cut them out of the world, and leave no trace to mourn. I have seen it done once. It was done at Ashfin, at the end, to the ones we did not burn. The floor seemed to tilt under her. Ashfin, Sethra said, bored. That is, ash and old history. It is the history this house was built on, girl, and you would do well to remember it. A creak of a chair. Your grandfather cleared the Ashfin lands, and we have grown fat on them for 15 years, and every soul of that pack was accounted for, burned, or scattered, or unmade, save the one that was never found. A child of 6 the Alpha's own get. The old lord, let that sit. I do not say the scentless girl is that child. I say a wolf is not born without a scent, and there is one place I know of where scents were torn out by the root, and it would be a very great joke on the gods if the king of the High Reach had just danced the last daughter of Ashfin into his own hall and set the whole court to sniffing at her wrist. A soft, dreadful pause. If she is what her silence says, she is. We will not need to break the king's choosing at the knowing at all. We will only need to walk up to him afterward and tell him what he has married. And then we will not need to lift a hand against her. He will do it for us, or the pack will. A chair scraped. The old lord was rising, and his heavy tread came toward the gallery arch, toward the very shadow where Melis stood pressed to the cold stone, with her heart slamming so hard, she was certain the sound of it alone would give her away. There was nowhere to go. The passage behind her ran straight and empty for 30 paces before it turned, and she would never reach the turn before he came through the arch. So she did the only thing her whole strange life had ever taught her to do. She went utterly still, and she trusted the emptiness in her to save her, the way it had doomed her every other day. The Lord of House Aldenmar walked out of the council gallery and passed within an arm's reach of her in the dark, so near she felt the warmth come off him, and his nose, that had read 1,000 men in 1,000 rooms, told him nothing at all. There was no one there for a wolf to smell. He straightened his coat and went down the stair, and Sethra followed after, and neither of them ever knew that the last daughter of Ashfin had stood close enough to touch them both while they planned her death. Melis did not remember the rest of the way to her chambers. She came back to herself with the bolt thrown, and her back against the door and her bound wrist clutched hard to her chest, and the whole shape of the trap stood clear before her, at last. The knowing would strip her bare before the pack, and if the stripping did not undo her, the mark beneath the binding would, twice over, for it would not only end the king's choosing, it would put the last living Ashfin into the open hands of the very house that had burned the rest. There was no version of the turning moon that she survived, and the cruelest part, the part that sat in her chest, like a swallowed coal, all through that sleepless night, was this. Every day she stayed was a day she cost him. A scentless bride was ruining him by inches already. An Ashfin bride would finish him outright. The kindest man she had ever known had walked the length of his hall to choose the one thing in it that could destroy him. And he did not even know it, and she was the only one who did. She went to the garden the next night with her mind made up, and her mind made up was the heaviest thing she had ever had to carry. He was already there when she came through the low gate, which had never once happened before, and he was not at the far end of the path, but halfway down it, as though he had started toward her, and then fought the better of it and made himself stop. The pale flowers stood open all around them, pouring out the sweetness that neither of them could catch, and for once the silence between them did not feel like distance. It felt like the one honest room left in the world, and she was about to walk out of it forever. I have been thinking, he began. So have I, she said, too quickly, because if she did not say it now, she never would. Your Majesty, I have come to give you back your word. He went, very still. You chose the woman who was walking away, Melis said. So choose her again, and let her keep walking. Break the choosing, before the moon turns, before the knowing, before I have cost you the last of what the court still allows you to hold. You have been kinder to me than anything I have ever earned, and the only kindness I have to give you back is to take myself out of your house before I bring it down, around you. Her voice did not shake. She had practiced until it would not. Set me free, and I will go. And in a year, no one will remember I was more than one bad evening you recovered from. She had braced herself for him to refuse. She had lain awake the whole night, building the walls she would need against his refusing, against him crossing the last of the path between them and taking her hands and telling her that he would not let her go. She had not built a single wall against the thing he actually did. He was quiet for a long time, and then he said, "Lo, perhaps you are right." The words she had begged him for should not have felt like a blade sliding in. She had asked him to free her. She had come here for precisely this. But she had come, she understood only now, in the secret and shameful hope that he would refuse, that he would fight, that a man who had walked the whole length of his own hall to reach her would not simply hand her back to the dark after 3 weeks of talking in the moonlight. Instead, he had agreed with her before she had even finished making her case. "You have thought about it too, then," she said, and was proud of how level it came out. "I think about little else." He turned his face away toward the pale flowers he could not smell. "I have watched what this court is doing to you. I hear what they call you in the corridors when they believe I am not near enough to hear. I bound you to a life that grinds a little more of you away with every day that passes, and I told myself the whole time that I was protecting you when I was only keeping you. If letting you go is the one thing left that I can give you and they cannot take away again, then I will give it, whatever it costs me to stand here and watch you leave." She heard that last part. She simply did not believe it. Men said whatever it costs me and meant underneath it I am relieved. She had no scent to read him by, and so she read him the only way she had ever been able to read anyone, by his face, and his face was turned away from her. And a face turned away was the oldest rejection she knew. "Thank you," Melis said. "You are very good." And she left him standing halfway down the path. And she did not run because queens do not run. And that small and vicious scrap of dignity was the only thing she had to hold on the whole long walk back through the sleeping house to her rooms, where she shut the door and pressed her bound wrist hard against her mouth and made no sound at all. Even her grief had no scent to give it away. She wept the way she had done every other thing in her whole life, invisibly and alone. Hala found her there an hour before dawn, as Hala always somehow found her, and did not ask what had happened, because Hala could read the whole of it in the wet and swollen face that no scent had betrayed and no scent had needed to. "You offered to leave him," Hala said. "It was not a guess." She set down her candle and lowered herself onto the edge of the bed with a grunt, and took Melis's cold hands into her own warm ones, and chafed them the way she had done when Melis was a half-frozen child, newly come in off the road. "And he did not stop you, and now you have decided he never wanted you at all." Her old mouth twisted. "Girl, I have watched that man for 4 years, since long before he knew your name. I have watched him sit alone at the head of a crowded hall and be lonelier than any soul in it. A man made like that does not learn to want a thing in a single season. He learns to guard it long before he ever lets himself want it, because wanting has only ever cost him. You watch his hands and not his mouth. You told me that trick yourself. You, of all people, know a turned-away face is not the same as a closed heart." She squeezed hard enough to hurt. "So do not, you dare, vanish on him before you have made good and certain which one it is." Melis said nothing. But she did not sleep either, and Hala's words sat in her the rest of that black night and would not lie still. She did not know, and could not have known, that within 3 days House Aldenmar would grow tired of waiting for the king to ruin himself and would reach out to finish it early, and that the man she had just accused in the silence of her own heart of relief would answer that reaching in the one language she had never once doubted in her life. Blood. The feast was Aldenmar's idea, though of course it wore another name. It was called a Blessing of the Chosen, held 3 nights before the knowing, and the whole court came, because the whole court could see the shape of what was coming, and no wolf wants to be absent when a king begins to fall. Malus sat at Keston's right hand and kept her face a locked door. They had not spoken since the garden. He had sent word that the freeing of her would be done properly and quietly after the turning of the moon, so that she would leave with honor and not disgrace. And she had sent back her thanks, and that had been all, and the space between their 2 chairs was wider than the whole length of the table. She did not look at him, she was watching the court instead, the way she had learned to watch rooms. And she did not like what the watching told her. There was a brightness on the great houses tonight, an eagerness, the look of people who have been promised something. Then the ceremony began, and she understood what they had been promised. It was an old rite, a censer of blessing smoke swung over the kings chosen by a priest of the pack, a thing meant to carry the good wishes of the ancestors on the air. An attendant of House Aldenmar brought the censer forward on its long silver chain, and the priest took it, and the smoke that rose from it was pale and sweet and wrong. Malus could not have said how she knew it was wrong, she who could smell nothing, except that the whole table had gone quiet in a way that had teeth in it, and Sethra Aldenmar was watching her over the rim of a cup, with her lovely eyes bright and fixed and unblinking, the way a cat watches a bird it has already caught. The priest lifted the censer and swung it toward Malus, and the pale smoke reached out for her like a hand. She never saw the king move. One moment he was in his chair, an arm's length away, and the next he was between her and the smoke, and his hand had closed on the silver chain and wrenched it aside, and the plume that had been meant to break over her broke over him instead, full in the face, and he breathed it in before he knew what it was, because he had moved on instinct. The way a wolf moves to put itself between its mate and a thing that is wrong, and instinct does not stop to ask what a poison is before it saves you from it. He made no sound at first. He straightened, and he looked almost puzzled, one hand rising to his own face. And then his knees went, and he folded down onto the stone in a spreading pool of his own heavy robes, and the great hall erupted. Malus was on the floor beside him before she knew she had left her chair. His eyes were open and streaming and rolled back white, and his breath came in a terrible dragging whistle, and around them the feast dissolved into screaming and shoving, half the court surging forward and half recoiling, voices climbing over one another crying for a healer, for the guard, for water, for anything. She got both hands on his face, and she could not have said his name, could not have said anything, and somewhere very near her, Sethra Aldenmar was already beginning to weep, prettily and loudly about the terrible, terrible accident. It was not an accident. Malus had heard them plan it in a cold gallery, and she knew exactly whose work this was, and she knew, with a sick and total certainty, that the smoke had been mixed for her. They carried him to his chambers with his head lolling, and the healer came. An old woman with sharp eyes and steady hands, and she bent over him a long time before she straightened, and her face, when she straightened, told Malus the worst before her mouth did. "He will live," the healer said. "The dose was not made to kill, it was made to do something worse than kill. To a wolf." She wiped her hands slowly. "It has burned out his scent. His nose is dead. Whether it wakes again in a month, or a year, or never, I cannot tell you, and I will not lie to a queen and pretend I can." She looked down at the king, at the most feared alpha in the realm, lying blind in the only way a wolf truly fears. "He will wake into a world gone silent. For a creature made to know everything by the air, there is no darkness deeper. You had best be there when he does." So Malus sat the long watch, and she did not leave it, and near the black middle of the night, his hand moved in hers, and his eyes opened, unfocused, searching. "Who is there?" he said, and his voice was a ruin. He turned his head on the pillow, and she watched him try to do the thing he had done every hour of his life without thinking. Try to reach out and catch the scent of whoever sat beside him, and know them, and find nothing. The whole world scrubbed to a flat and terrible blank. Panic crossed his face, the panic of a man who has just gone blind in the dark. Who is there? I cannot tell. Who? It is Malus, she said, and took his searching hand in both of hers and held it hard. He went still at the sound of her voice, and then to her astonishment, the panic drained out of him, and something almost like peace came into his ruined face, and he let out a long breath. You? He said. Of course it would be you. You are the one person I never could read anyway. His fingers tightened weakly around hers. The whole world just went as silent as you have always been to me. Do you know, I think I am the only man alive who was made ready for this. You made me ready for it, all those nights, teaching me to sit beside a person I could not smell and trust that she was there. His eyes found her face and held it, and he was not turning away now. I would have breathed a great deal worse than that to keep it off you. I need you to know that I did not agree to free you in the garden because I wished you gone. I agreed because I could not stand one more day of watching them grind you down and setting you loose. Was the only way I could think of to save you. I did it the way a fool saves a thing, by throwing it away. Malus sat with his hand in hers, and the whole shape of the last weeks rearranged itself around her. Every cold word turned warm, every turned-away face turned back, and she could not speak. Below them in the dark house, she could already hear it beginning, the sound she had learned to dread, the sound of the great houses gathering in the corridors to murmur over a king who could no longer smell a knife coming. A king the pack could not respect, a crippled alpha and his soulless bride, and a court that smelled blood in the air. All of it, except the two people in this room. We have to leave, Malus whispered. Tonight. Somewhere, with clean air, where I can keep you alive long enough to think. She pressed his hand to her cheek. Where is the one place in all your kingdom that does not stink of these people? His cracked mouth almost smiled. Greenear, he said. Greenear was a low stone lodge at the edge of a cold lake, 3 days from the court, and a world away from it. Ringed by dark pines and open sky, and the air there was so clean that even the healthy noses of the guards who brought them relaxed, and for the king, who had no nose left at all, it was simply quiet, and the quiet was a mercy. For the first time since the night of the ball, they were equal. She had not expected that to be the thing that saved them, but it was. At the court, Keston had been drowning, a wolf robbed of the one sense that ran his whole world, flinching at every corner, because he could no longer tell friend from enemy on the air, ashamed and furious and lost. At Greymere there was no court to read, and so there was nothing to fail at, and slowly, day by day, he began to come back to himself. And the person who brought him back was the one soul in the realm who had spent her entire life doing the thing he now had to learn. You are reading his hands, she told him one morning, of the steward, who had come out from a nearby holding with the accounts. Watch his hands and not his face. A man guards his face because he knows you are looking at it. He forgets his hands, and later, he lied to you just now about the grain. You could not smell it, but you could have seen it. He touched his own mouth as he said the number. Men touch the lie as it leaves them, as if to call it back. Keston learned. He was a quick study, and he was humble in a way. She had never seen a powerful man be humble, and the thing that had made her an outcast her whole life, the hard-won art of knowing people without a single hint from the air, she gave to him now, piece by piece, like a woman handing over the tools of a trade. It was not pity that grew between them over those long, clean days. Pity is a thing you give, downward. This was two people, standing on the same ground at last, and building something on it together. They fell into an easy rhythm. Neither of them had ever been allowed before. In the mornings, she walked him down to the gray lake and taught him to read the water the way she had taught herself as a child to read the whole world, the wind coming off it, the fish rising, the weather turning in the west long before it broke. In the afternoons the steward's men brought the small business of the holding, and he practiced his new sight on them and grew quick at it, and once caught out a cheat that the sharp old healer herself had missed, and laughed aloud in plain surprise at his own cleverness, a sound Malus had never heard him make in all the weeks she had known him. In the evenings, they sat by the fire, and he made her talk, because talk was very nearly the only sense they had left between them, and she found that she who had guarded every single word for 21 years could not stop giving them to him now, small ones and foolish ones and true ones alike. She had not known that a person could be tired in the good way, the way of a body that has laughed too much in a single day. She learned it at Graymere. She learned a great many things there that she had long ago given up on ever learning at all. He did not press her. That was the other thing. He noticed everything now, more than ever, because she had taught him how, and she knew that he had noticed the wide cuff she never removed, even in the warm lodge, and the way she turned her left wrist from him without seeming to, and he said nothing, and asked nothing, and let her keep her locked door, locked. And because he did not force it, she found, one night, by the low fire, that she wanted to give him a little of it freely. "I was not born without a cent," she said, "to the flames and not to him. It was taken from me. When I was a child, someone did an old and ugly thing to hide what she was, because she was the last of something, and, being the last of it, meant being hunted. My whole family was killed. I carry a mark that would tell anyone who saw it exactly who I am, and so I have kept it covered every day of my life, because the people who did the killing are not finished, and they are closer than you think." She made herself stop there, at the very edge of the cliff, and did not say the name of her dead pack. "That is as much as I can give you and keep you safe. Please do not ask me for the rest." He was quiet a while. Then his hand found hers across the space between their chairs, and this time she did not pull the wrist away, and he only held it, and said, "Then I will not ask. I have wanted for weeks to know what you were. It turns out I would rather know who you are, and that I already do." She turned to look at him, and the firelight was on his ruined, kind, watchful face, and the last of the careful distance she had kept between herself and every living person for 21 years simply gave way, all at once, like ice going off a lake in spring. She crossed the space herself this time. She was the one who closed it. And when she kissed him, he made a low sound of pure surprise, as though even after everything he had not let himself believe she would, and then his hand came up to cradle the back of her head, as gently as if she were made of the thinnest glass, and something deep and warm and enormous turned over between them in the dark. Something neither of them had a name for yet. They had 4 days of it. 4 clean, bright, stolen days by the cold lake, and Malus was happier than she had known a person could be, and she should have known better, because happiness had never once in her life been allowed to stand for long. On the 5th morning, a rider came down the pine road at a gallop with the seneschal's seal, and the message he carried was short, and it was from Grail, and it said that the council would wait no longer. The knowing was fixed for the next turning of the moon, and would not be moved again. House Aldenmar had all but taken the court in the king's absence, and if the king did not return and seal his bond before the pack, he would return to no crown at all. And there was one line more, in the old loremaster's dry hand, that made the clean air of Graymere turn to ice in Malus's chest. "Come quickly," it read, "and guard your lady close. They have begun to ask questions about the burning of Ashfin." She did not sleep that night. She lay in the dark, with Keston's slow breath beside her, and the loremaster's warning turning over and over in her. They have begun to ask questions about the burning of Ashfin, and she understood that the last of her time had run out, and that whatever she did now, she would do as the person she truly was, and not the shadow she had spent her life pretending to be. And it was in the deepest part of that sleepless night, lying still so as not to wake him, that she felt it. It began as warmth low in her chest, a small steady glow like a coal that would not go out, and then it spread, and she realized with a slow rising astonishment that the warmth was not entirely her own. Threaded through it, faint but unmistakable, was him. His sleep, his ease, the bone-deep contentment of a man who, for the first time in a long and lonely life, was not lying awake, braced against the world. Because the one person he trusted lay beside him, she could feel it. Malis sat up in the dark, her heart pounding, and pushed back the cuff on her left wrist with shaking fingers. The Ashfen brand was there as it had always been, 3 thin lines and a broken circle, silver pale in the moonlight. But it was not alone anymore. Curled around it, new, warm to the touch, was a second mark she had never seen in her life. A fine, dark spiral that had not been there yesterday, that no hand had put there, that had simply grown out of her own skin in the night the way a flower grows. She knew what it was. Every wolf knew what it was, though few living had ever seen one, for it was the rarest thing in the whole world. It was a mate mark. The mark that blooms on the skin of 2 wolves, when a true bond completes between them. Unfakeable, undeniable, the deepest truth a wolf can carry. And it was impossible. It was flatly, completely impossible, because a mate bond is made through scent. Everyone knew that. Every child knew that. The bond runs on the air between 2 wolves and grows out of the knowing of one another's scent. A wolf with no scent could no more be truly mated than a stone could sing. Sethra had said it, in front of 600 people on the night of the ball. A wolf with no scent is a wolf with no soul. Malis pressed her hand over the new mark and began, silently, in the dark, to laugh, and then to cry, and then both together. Because here, at last, was the answer to the thing that had been said over her whole life. The bond had never needed a scent. It had never needed the air at all. It had grown in the one place the whole clever, perfumed, scent-drunk world of wolves had never thought to look. It had grown in the truth between 2 people who could only ever know each other by choosing to. She was bonded. She, the scentless nothing, the ill omen, the soulless girl they would have drowned at birth, was a true mate, which meant she had always had exactly the soul they swore she lacked. And no one, not Sethra, not the council, not the whole gathered pack of the High Reach, could ever take that from her again. She woke him. She could not help it. She showed him her wrist, the 2 marks curled together, and she watched him understand, and she watched his own hand rise slowly to the back of his other hand, where the old white scar had been for 20 years, and where now, curled over it, warm and new, was the twin of her spiral. "It cannot be," he breathed, and there were tears standing in his ruined eyes. "I have no nose left to bond with. You have no scent to bond by. This is not possible." "I know," Malis said, laughing, crying, holding his marked hand against her marked wrist so the 2 spirals met. "I know it is not. We did it anyway, for 1 whole shining hour. In the deep of that night, everything was possible. If they were truly bonded, then the knowing could not deny it, for the mate mark was the oldest proof there was, older than the centrite itself. Let Aldenmar bring the whole pack. Let them demand her scent. She would show them a truth deeper than scent, blooming on her own skin, and they would have to bow to it. Hope, real and fierce, came up in her like the sun. They lay awake together the rest of that hour and did not speak of councils or of Aldenmar at all. He traced the 2 marks on her wrist, over and over, with one careful finger, the silver brand and the dark spiral wound around it, as though he could not quite make himself believe that either of them was real, and she watched his ruined face in the moonlight and felt, through the bond that stood open between them now, the thing that he did not say. That after a whole life of being feared, he was, for the first time, she thought, in many years, simply being held. It was the happiest hour of her life. She would think of it often in the days that came after, and be glad past all words that she had not known, lying there, How very few hours of that kind were left to them before the road came climbing up to Greymere to take it all away. And then, in the gray before dawn, the hope met the cold, hard edge of the thing she had not yet told him, and it broke on it. Because to stand before the pack and show them the mate mark on her wrist, she would have to bear that wrist. And the mate mark did not stand alone on it. Curled around it, silver and condemning, was the brand of the Alpha's line of Ashfen, and there was no showing the one without the other. To be vindicated, she would have to be exposed. To prove she had a soul, she would have to hand House Aldenmar, the last living daughter of the pack they had burned. She turned to him in the gray light, and her joy was gone, and something far more frightening had come into its place. Resolve. Before you take me back to that court, she said quietly, before you stake your crown and your life on me, in front of the whole pack, there is a thing you have to know about what I am. And when you have heard it, you may not wish to fight for me at all, she told him by the cold hearth, as the sun came up over the lake. And she left nothing out this time. She told him her true name, and the name of her dead pack. She unwound the binding from her wrist, and let him see the whole of the Ashfen brand in the gray daylight, 3 thin lines and a broken circle, the birthmark of the Alpha's own line, worn by a child of 6 who had been the only soul that was never found when the fires went out. She told him what she had overheard in the cold gallery, that House Aldenmar had grown fat for 15 years on the cleared lands of a pack they had burned to the last child, that Sethra's own grandfather had led the burning, and that the missing child, the one they had spent all those years swearing was dead, had been dancing in a gray dress at the edge of his hall on the night he chose her. She watched his face the whole time she spoke, reading it the way she read everything, and she waited for the recoil. She had braced for horror, or for the cold calculation of a king learning that his chosen was the living wound at the heart of his own realm. She did not get either. What crossed Keston's ruined face, as the truth of it landed, was grief. Vast, tired, ancient grief, and under it a fear so total that it took her a moment to understand that the fear was not for himself. It was all for her. They will kill you, he said. It was not a question. The moment they can prove what you are, they will not need to break our bond or turn the pack. They will simply finish the work their grandfather began, and they will call it justice, and half the court will thank them for it. He was on his feet now, pacing the low room like a caged thing, his hands opening and closing. The crime was my crown's. It was done in my grandfather's name when I was young, but it was done under the banner I wear, and I have spent my reign with no idea it had even happened, because Aldenmar buried it under 15 years of feasts. And now the one survivor of it is the woman I have bonded, and if I take you back into that hall, I am carrying you to the slaughter with my own 2 hands. Then we fight them, Mylus said, rising too. We have the mate mark. We have the truth. We show the pack what they did. No, the word came out of him hard and final, and it stopped her cold. No, we do not. You do not. He turned to face her, and there was something terrible and settled in him now, the look of a man who has made a decision, and hates it. I am sending you away tonight, not to the court. Away out of the High Reach entirely, north to the freeholds where Aldenmar's arm cannot reach, under another name, with gold enough to live your whole life unhunted. I will go back to that hall alone. I will tell them the choosing is broken, and my chosen has fled in shame, and I will let them believe it, and I will let them win, because a court that thinks it has won stops looking for the thing it was hunting. His voice cracked and he pushed through it. You will live. Do you hear me? You have spent 21 years surviving by being no one, and I am asking you to be no one for 1 year more, one last time, so that you survive this, too. Mylus stared at him, and the bond between them was wide open now, and through it, she could feel exactly what the offer was costing him, the love and the terror and the grief all braided together, and she understood that he meant every word of it, that he would truly do this, throw away the bond and the crown and her, to keep her breathing. and it made her furious. "You are doing it again," she said, and her voice shook now, not with fear, but with anger. "In the garden you decided to free me for my own good, and did not once ask what I wanted. Now you have decided to send me into hiding for my own good, and again you have not asked. You would have me spend the rest of my life as no one, alone, unhunted and unmourned, while you go back and let them take everything from you, and you call that saving me." She crossed the room and took his marked hand and pressed it to her marked wrist, the two spirals meeting, the bond flaring hot between them. "I have been no one my whole life, Keston. It kept me alive, and it was not living. I will not do it again. Not even for you. Not even to survive. I did not walk out of that hall on the night of the ball trying to be no one. I was trying to disappear, because I thought that was all a scentless thing was allowed to want. And then a man crossed the whole room and made me want to be someone instead. You will die," he said low and broken. "Then I will die as the last daughter of Ashvin," she said in the open, "with my name beside my mate. Not as a ghost in the freeholds, with your gold, and your good intentions and no one who ever knew my face." She lifted her chin, and it was the same gesture she had made against Sethra on the night of the ball, only now there was a whole life behind it. "You do not get to decide this one alone. It is my name, it is my wrist, it is my choice." For a long moment he did not answer, and through the open bond she felt him at war with himself, the terror for her grinding against something else, something that had been starved in him for a very long time, the plain and simple wish to stop carrying everything in the world alone. He had spent his whole reign deciding the hard things by himself and paying for them by himself. No one had ever once stood in front of him and demanded the right to pay a price at his side. "I have never in my life been allowed to lose a thing and keep my honor both," he said at last, very low. "And you are asking me to risk you. Do you understand what it is you are asking of me?" "I am asking you to trust me the way you learned to in the dark," she said. Like a man with no nose at all, something in him gave way. She felt it go through the bond, like a breath a man has held so long he has forgotten he was holding it, finally let out. Outside, on the pine road, hoofbeats, more than one rider and coming fast, they both turned. Keston moved to the window, and Malus saw his shoulders go rigid, and when he spoke his voice had gone flat and strange. "It is the guard from the court," he said. "Grail's men, at the front. But they are not alone." A long, awful pause. "House Aldenmar rides behind them, under a banner of accusation, and the whole council with them. They have not come to escort us to the knowing." "Malus." He turned from the window, and his ruined eyes found hers. "They have come to take you now. They already know." There was no fleeing after that. The pine road was the only way down from Greymere, and it was full of Aldenmar's riders, and so in the end, the last daughter of Ashvin went to the knowing, not as a fugitive dragged in chains, but as a queen who had chosen to walk, and that choosing was the first blow struck in a battle no one in that hall knew had already begun. They held it in the great hall of Varnhold, the same floor where 100 women had once lined up in the light to be chosen, and the whole pack of the High Reach filled it now, 600 wolves and more, and the air was thick with their scent and their hunger, and at the head of it all stood the council. And, at the front of the council, stood Sethra Aldenmar and her father, and they were smiling. Malus walked the length of that hall on Keston's arm. The court had come expecting to watch a soulless nobody be stripped bare before the pack, and they got their silence indeed, for she gave them no scent at all as she passed, and the murmur of it rose around her exactly as it had on the night of the ball. Is that her? Is that really her? The scentless one, the ill omen? She did not shrink from it. She walked through it with her chin level and her wrist for the first time in her life, unbound. The old lord of House Aldenmar did not wait for the right. He struck the moment they reached the floor. "Before this pack seals a lie," he called out, and his voice filled the hall. "Let it hear the truth of the woman its king would bind. She has no scent. Every soul here has felt it. The wrongness, the empty air where a wolf should be. A wolf with no scent has no soul, and cannot be mated, and cannot be queen, but there is worse. He let the pause stretch, savoring it, the showman at the height of his craft. I have made it my work to learn what she is. And what she is the last poisoned root of a pack this realm put down 15 years ago for its treachery. She is Ashfen. She is the enemy blood, come creeping back into the very heart of the High Reach, to sit on its throne and rot it from within. I say she is no bride. I say she is a wound. And I say the pack should close it tonight. The hall erupted. It was the sound she had dreaded her whole life. 600 wolves turning against her at once, and it broke over her like a black wave. And for one moment the old habit rose up screaming to make herself small, to run, to be no one. She lifted her wrist instead. "You are right," Malus said, and though her voice was not loud, something in it cut clean through the roar and stilled it. "I am the last of Ashfen. I am the child your grandfather's fires never found." She turned slowly so the whole hall could see, and she held her bare left wrist up into the light. "Here is the brand of my father's line that I have hidden every day of my life because your house has been hunting the wearer of it for 15 years. Look at it. Every elder here old enough to remember Ashfen knows that mark. I am done hiding it. I am done being no one, so that your family can sleep easy on stolen ground." A different sound went through the hall now. Older wolves murmuring, some of them going pale, the ones with long memories. "But that is not the only mark I carry," she said. "And it is not the one that condemns you." She turned her wrist so the light caught the second mark, the fine dark spiral curled around the silver brand. "You told this pack that a scentless wolf has no soul and cannot be truly mated. You have staked everything on it, so look closely at what has grown on my skin. Every wolf here knows a true mate mark on sight, though few of you have ever seen one, and every wolf here knows it cannot be painted on, or bought, or faked." And beside her Keston lifted his own hand and bared the back of it, where the twin spiral curled warm over the old white scar, and held it up next to hers so that the whole pack could see the two marks were one. The silence that fell, then, was total. "I have no scent," Malus said into it, "and I am bonded to your king, truly, completely, by the deepest mark our kind can carry." Both of those things are true at once, which means everything your house has told you about scent, and souls, and who is allowed to be worth loving, has been a lie, told for 15 years by the family that needed you to believe it, so that you would never look too closely at where their money came from. It was Grail who stepped forward then, the old lore master, who kept the whole law of the High Reach in his head, and who had looked at Malice on the night of the ball and given nothing away. He came to the center of the floor, took her marked wrist in his dry old hands, studied it a long moment before them all, then lifted his head, and his voice was the voice of the law itself. "The mate mark is true," he said. "I have given my life to the keeping of our law, and I stake the whole of it on this. This is a true bond, and no centret ever devised stands above it. For the mark is the older law and the truer one." His pale eyes swept the council, and they were not neutral now, not remotely. "And I am old enough to remember, Ashfen. I remember who rode out that year, and who came home rich, and whose grandfather burned a sleeping pack over a treachery he invented to justify the taking of good land. I have kept that memory quiet for 15 years, because there was no one left alive to speak it for. There is now." He inclined his head to Malus, deep, the bow ode to a queen. "The law knows you, daughter of Ashfen. The law has been waiting for you." House Aldenmar broke apart in the space of a single hour. The old lord shouted of enemy blood and treachery, but the pack was no longer listening to him, because the pack had seen the true mate mark with its own eyes, and heard the lore master name the old crime, and a lie that is held only because no one dared look at it comes apart very fast once everyone is looking. By the time the moon, that was to have seen the knowing, had risen, it was Aldenmar, the guards led from the hall, and not Malus. Sethra came to her once, at the very end, in the emptying hall, the way Malus had somehow always known she would. The gold hair was still perfect, the lovely face was white, and stripped of all its warmth. "You were a servant," Sethra said, low and shaking. "You were nothing. I do not understand how." Malus looked at her, this woman who had called her soulless in front of 600 people, whose family had burned her whole world, and she found, a little to her own surprise, that she had no cruelty left in her to spend. She only felt tired and free. "You spent your whole life making yourself into exactly what this hall wanted to smell," Malus said gently. "You were so busy being chosen that you never learned how to be known." "That is the whole of it, Sethra. That is the only thing that was ever different between us. He could smell every single thing you wanted him to feel." She turned to go, to where Keston stood waiting for her, at the center of the floor, his marked hand open. "And he could not smell one thing about me, at all, so he had to actually look." She took her husband's hand, and the two spirals met, and the bond glowed warm and steady between them, needing no air to carry it. His scent never did come back. The healers were wrong about that, and for the rest of his reign, the most feared alpha of the High Reach walked his own court unable to smell a single lie in it, and never once seemed to mind. He had married the finest teacher in the realm, he would say, and she had taught him the one thing that scent never could. They had, each of them, been the thing the world looked straight past. The scentless servant no one would stoop to see, and the king so busy, being feared that no one had ever truly known him either. They had found in the one silence the perfumed world could not fill, that being smelled and being known are not the same thing at all, and that only one of them lasts. And so they chose each other, in the open, in front of everyone, with nothing on the air between them but the truth. And that was everything. Thank you for listening. I hope this one stayed with you. Tell me what you think in the comments. Was Keston right to try to send her away into hiding to keep her alive, even though it meant deciding her fate for her all over again? Or was Malus right that a life spent as no one is not a life worth saving? I would truly love to know where you land on it. I will see you very soon with another story.